Once upon a time. How many times have you heard that line? What do you think when you hear it? A faraway land? A castle? A beautiful princess? An enchanted forest? Mysterious creatures? For me, I see a concrete jungle. I see people just trying to live their lives, hiding who they are. And a sheriff just trying to keep the peace. In 2002, comic book writer Bill Willingham, known for the Time for Pantheon, would introduce the world to a series that asked the question, what happens after Ever After? Hey everyone, how's it going? Well, welcome to part 1 of the season of Fables, a retrospective on the Eisner Award-winning series Fables, talking about the good, the bad, and the meta. Though, mostly the good. But before we get into that, I should explain how this series came to be. And luckily, that's gonna be pretty quick, as, I couldn't really find exactly why Willingham decided to make the series. Only that for the longest time, he found the idea of fairy tale characters being forced to live in modern day very interesting. Which, if that's the only case, I don't blame him, as there have been others. How'd this series stand out? Well, let's get started with the season of Fables and head to Fabletown. Our story begins with a classic boy who cried wolf. Well, okay, not exactly a boy, but he's a kid at heart. A terrible kid, but a kid. This is Jack Horner. No, but they're both scumbags. Jack has been sprinting down Bullfinch and Kipling Street. Yeah, before the CW Arrowverse, Fables was the king when it came to Arthur name drops. Jack heads into the Woodlands. On the surface, it's a luxury apartment complex, but for the Fables, it's their city hall and the home of the biggest and baddest Fable of all, Bigby Wolf, whose first instinct is to mock him, / let the readers know he's also Jack from Jack and the Beanstalk. Yeah, I'll get more into it later, but Jack Horner in the series is like 90% of the Jacks in fairy tales and folklore. Unless they got a last name, they're most likely Jack Horner. Jack tells Bigby it's important as something terrible has happened, but before we find out, we deal with something all Fables fear: marriage counseling. I kid, but given what happens next, it's pretty close. The woman they're talking to isn't a counselor, but Snow White, deputy mayor and director of operations. She's really not in the mood, as the couple in question is Beauty and the Beast, and the latter is having trouble staying in his human form, and is slowly shifting back into his beastly form. Why? Well...
It's not my fault. It's the ancient Carthagon disappeared when my wife agreed to marry me way back when. And now it's come and go.
See, I told you he'd blame me.
I'm not blaming you, my sweetie, but I need to turn back to a beast till you said you're mad at me.
Yeah, in this version, the curse the beast suffers from is connected to his emotional state. If he doesn't feel that Beauty loves him, he starts reverting back to his beastly form, which is a problem since he has to keep his form in check if he wants to live in the Woodlands. You see, one of the rules of Fabletown is that you have to be able to pass as a human to live there. If you don't look human, you could get yourself a glamour charm to take human form, like two of the characters that work in the building, the troll Grimble and the goblin Hobbs, or be capable of shapeshifting like Beast and Bigby. If you can't, well, you'll end up on the farm, a place where all non-human Fables end up going. Beauty isn't having it, as they can't afford glamour. In fact, they barely have the cash to get by, as they lost their fortune when they left their world, or the homeland as they call it. Snow gets it, but reminds them that's the case for most Fables when they were forced out by someone known as the Adversary. Snow goes on and tells them that even though they are part of a network of Fable communities across the world, unfortunately the American branch isn't doing so well and have to get by on goodwill and kissing the asses of other Fables who did make it out with all their cash. She even tells them they could talk to the mayor of Fabletown, King Cole, as in Old King Cole from the old nursery rhyme of the same name. However, the results would probably be the same. All that does is piss Beauty off though, revealing to the reader that Snow White and Prince Charming, whose name actually is Charming, divorced centuries ago, so wouldn't know how to handle a marriage this long, and is about to imply some not so safe for work things regarding her and the seven dwarves, but is cut off by the introduction of Boy Blue from the nursery rhyme Little Boy Blue, and tells them to leave, which might come off as rude, but he quickly makes it clear he was saving their asses, as one of the rules in the office is that you never mention the dwarves. After they leave, Bigby comes in, and though Blue warns him she's in a bad mood, he just says it's gonna get worse. Elsewhere, we see Prince Charming, where we learn that he is a man whore. This dude puts Captain Kirk, Captain Jack, 007, Sterling Archer, and Barney Stinson to shame on how much he gets laid, and for the last two, just as vain and also starting starting out as a scumbag, as he's only in New York because he pissed off every rich Fable and Bunniie in Europe. Hey, quick little add-on here. I neglected to bring up the fact that Bunniie in the universe is what they call regular human beings. After that, we go back to Bigby, who reveals to Snow what Jack told him. Apparently, her sister, Rose Red, and like that, 70% of you just learned that Snow White had a sister. Jack says he found the apartment wrecked, but at first Snow doesn't bat an eye, thinking that it was due to a party since Rose has a bit of a reputation for being a party girl. But Jack believes it couldn't be the case, so Bigby heads to investigate, and Snow insists on getting involved since it is her sister. And unless she was partying with Dracula, which is plausible, he is an actual character in this world, Bigby looks through the room, gets a better look on the message on the wall, written in blood, saying no more happily ever after, and for some reason decides to take Jack in. The following day, we see a bit of Bigby's home life and learn that he has an unofficial roommate, Colin, one of the 3 pigs. Colin constantly escapes the farm and always heads to Bigby's place, usually guilt-tripping him over the whole, blowing his house down and eating him. And if we're wondering how he's still alive, that's because all Fables have a built-in healing factor, along with their longevity. And if enough Mundies remember them, well, the healing can become stronger. Now, they can be killed, but as you'll see as we go on, it can take a lot, depending on the Fable. Afterwards, Bigby meets with Snow, and they decide to discuss who could have attacked Rose. Bigby believes it has to be a Fable, given the message and the fact that both Jack and Rose had pissed off a lot of people in the past, so anyone could have done it, even Snow. Why? Well, later we see Snow and Charming meeting up, where we learn that they divorced after he cheated on her with Rose, which is kind of creepy when you find out in Jack's spin-off series, Jack Fables, more on that another time, that Prince Charming is actually Jack's father, who slept with his mother while cheating on his previous wife, which means Jack was dating his former step-aunt. Yeah, I know it's not blood-related, but still weird. While looking at that creepy family tree, we are introduced to Bluebeard, former pirate, former serial killer. No, really, that was his story. He was known for marrying beautiful women and then killing them, except for his last wife. Now, though, he's actually Fabletown's main financial backer, as he was one of the few Fables to retain all his treasure. While he was fencing with Charming's other ex-wife, Cinderella, she reveals that she knows that Rose is missing, and even goes further by hinting she might have been killed. And though Bigby and Snow do see him as a suspect, since again, he was a serial killer, plus they found out from Jack that she once dated Bluebeard to make him jealous, an easy motive for him to go after her out of revenge, but Bluebeard reveals that he was actually still seeing Rose after the supposed breakup, and even reveals that she was his fiancée. Since she wasn't his wife yet, it wouldn't fit his MO. Plus, he's offering a bounty of $1 million for both Rose and whoever is behind this. So now everyone is on the case. As they go on, Bigby and Snow continues interviewing Fables like Mayor Cole, the Witch of the Black Forest, getting assistance from fellow Fables like Boy Blue, the building's janitor Flycatcher, formerly the Frog Prince, and Buffkin is one of the Fables that use glamour, as he was one of the Wicked Witch's flying monkeys, but now is the building's librarian, while also making sure that Bluebeard doesn't try to murder Jack, all leading up to Remembrance Day, celebrating the anniversary on when the Fables left the homeland. So what exactly happened? What or who could make these Fables legends in exile? Sorry, not sorry. In the homeland, the Fables were once divided. They lived their lives in peace and focused on what was happening to them in their own adventures. But while they did that, a being simply known as the Adversary rose to power. No one knew where he came from or what he was. But either way, he had the capability of uniting the evils of each kingdom he conquered, starting with the Land of Oz, and 2 other kingdoms that, though not named, were clearly Middle-earth from the Lord of the Rings series and the Land of Narnia. But due to the fact that those 2 are still not in the public domain, they couldn't be directly named. So for artistic flair, Willingham called them things like the Kingdom of the Far Shores of Never, the Kingdom of the Great Lion, and though Oz was in the public domain, but sticking with the tone, he goes for the Emerald Kingdom. And what did the other kingdoms do? Nothing. They just kept to themselves. As to them, it wasn't their kingdom's problem. Sure, they felt bad, but it wasn't happening to them. But they would soon learn that, as Edmund Burke so eloquently said, the only necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Which is exactly what happened. The Adversary and his armies rained hell on them, and by the time they realized they had to join forces, it was too late. The Adversary and his army overpowered them, and the only thing left to do was to run. Run to a land where magic is just but a fantasy, the world of the mundane, the world of humans. After a toast, the party begins. People drink, mingle, catch up after not seeing each other for so long. It's like a high school reunion, and also like a high school reunion, we have people who don't want to be there, but go anyway in hopes of getting revenge, who in this case Well,
Hi, Pinocchio. I haven't seen you in a while. Enjoying the party?
No, I am certainly not having a good time. I never had a good time in these ridiculous celebrations.
Then why do you come each year?
Because sooner or later, the blue fairy who turned me into a real boy is going to show her face in one of these things. I'm gonna kick your pretty sure ass! But who knew I was gonna stay a boy forever? The ditzy bitch interpreted my wish too literally. I'm over 3 centuries old, and I'm still haven't gone through puberty. I wanna grow up, I want my balls to drop, and I wanna get laid.
well, that's hilarious, but you're probably wondering what happened to Rose. After a nice dance with Snow and a night swim, Bigby finally tells us who was behind Rose's kidnapping. Rose Red. Yep, it was all a lie. A quick rich scheme Jack thought up with Rose. They were both in debt by Bluebeard. Jack believed he would make it big by investing in internet stock, but had no real cash to invest, so talked Rose into seducing and getting engaged to Bluebeard, and had an agreement that she would get a large amount of money as a dowry on the condition they kept the engagement a secret for 1 year, and she'd return with the money. They'd use the dowry money to invest. If it worked out, Jack and Rose could pay their debt, and after leaving Bluebeard, would still have the money on the side. But Jack apparently invested in Enron because it went bust fast. With the money gone and the wedding fast approaching, they faked Rose's death/kidnapping to avoid confronting the guy known for killing his wives, while Jack was hoping to use it as a distraction to get out of town till the heat died down. That rhymed, but unfortunately for Jack, Bigby had them pinned from the start. The placement on the blood of the room was all off. The bloody splatters were too focused, as if they were planned, and certain items that should have been damaged or stained in the supposed scuffle were in surprisingly good conditions and blood-free. This was because Rose was unwilling to damage her prized possessions. So yeah, they were cooked but not totally screwed. They're both under Bigby's custody, meaning besides doing community service, they'll also be under his protection. Since under house arrest, they'll be very close to Bigby, and not many dare to cross him. As for the engagement, well, Snow brings up the agreement that Bluebeard made with Rose, that neither one would tell anyone about the engagement for at least a year, and since the year wasn't up yet, and he told them during the investigation, the engagement was off, to Bluebeard's dismay. So that wraps up everything, though one question eludes Snow. Why did Bigby want her to dance with him?
I wanted you to go to the damned dance with me as my date.
Seriously? You were too shy or afraid to ask me to go to this gala with you? So pretended it was business related?
Yeah, that's about it.
That's pathetic.
Really? I was hoping for something more along the lines of oddly, disarmingly charming.
Well, it wasn't. Don't do it again. We're colleagues and nothing more.
Fine.
Well, Wolf Among Us says otherwise. Legends in Exile was an amazing start. It has great world building, solid character introduction, along with mixing the world of fairy tales with the grittiness of noir. Honestly, Willingham could have just stuck with this formula and people would have been satisfied. But Willingham had other plans, as the next story would focus less on the grim and gritty streets of Fabletown, and instead, well, remember what I said in the Animal Castle review? Animal Farm is a pretty important story in pop culture, getting referenced in other novels, TV shows, and films. Aren't you supposed to review a comic? I'm getting into that. And of course, references in comics, with the best example being the second volume of Fables. Yep, in Volume 2, a revolution was beginning. In the second volume, Animal Farm, Snow decides that she and Rose would take Colin back to the farm this time, as she plans to talk to the guy running the farm, Wayland Smith, who is actually Wayland the Smith from Norse and German mythology, to see if they can figure out a way for this not to happen again, and to also see if her and Red can at least try to patch things up. Yeah, Rose does not want to do that, but community service. When they get to the farm, they find that no one is there to greet them, but it doesn't take long for Snow to find the locals having some sort of meeting being run by Dunn, another one of the three pigs, telling them to be ready for something. But stops when he notices Snow, and yeah, it's very clear something's going on, but Snow chooses to play it cool, and to get to the bottom of this, while they take Colin to Dunn and the last of the three pigs, Posey, and ask a few questions. Meanwhile, in New York, the Fables aren't exactly happy with Snow gone, as she put Bigby in charge, and as you can guess, he doesn't have time to deal with their crap, and they don't want to talk to him. They try to talk to Blue, but the kid isn't exactly sure how to handle their situations, and is just trying to keep the office in order till Snow gets back. But that ain't easy, as Buffkin is getting drunk and gave booze to the Forsworn Knight, an undead knight hanging on the branch of the tree in Snow's office, often singing vague prophecies, essentially like many oracles in stories of mythology. Speaking of drinking, after having tea with the pigs, and besides hearing the two's issues with the farm, and that no matter how nice they make it, the problem is they can never leave the farm, Snow gets less answers and more questions, as Dun and Posey can't seem to get their story straight on what happened to Waylon Smith. And after the two sisters leave, we learn that Colin didn't escape the farm to just sleep in Bigby's apartment, but to also get a duplicate key of Snow's office. He tells him he failed, and remember when I said it takes a lot to kill a Fable? Yeah. Now some fans have questioned why that was able to kill him, since we later see other Fables suffer similar fates, yet survive. Though I will get more into it later. For now, I'll just say that first off, these Fables were different species than Colin, so some of their bodies had built-in immunities to survive beheadings, and others had magical abilities to give them an edge on surviving, or the possibility of revival. And of course, there's the whole thing with the memories. Because Fables are well remembered, and everyone knows Three Little Pigs, Colin should survive, right? Well, we later learn in the series, Fables can lose a portion of their strength if another takes their name and title. Hell, sometimes after their death, they end up getting replaced to keep the story alive. But yeah, Colin is dead, and while Snow is trying to figure out who is behind it, Posey talks to Rose, saying that she noticed that she seemed to sympathize with their plight during last night's discussion, and wishes to show her something. And yeah, Napoleon and Squealer had nothing on them. It doesn't take a detective to figure out they plan to go to war with Fabletown, in hopes they could gain the freedom to leave the farm and travel the world. And believe it or not, the one behind it is not Dun or Posey. It's actually Goldilocks. And though she at first seems to be doing this because she cares about the animal's plight and also sleeping with Boo Bear of the Three Bears, which is just ew. But yeah, in truth, it's actually part of a bigger plan to take control of Fabletown and use their magical resources to rule all of New York. It's also revealed that she was the one who killed Colin, and Rose figured it out and joined Posey while she is secretly helping Snow escape with the help of a sympathizer, Renard the Fox, from medieval folklore. As they escape capture from Goldie and her forces along with the Three Bears, the White Rabbit of Wonderland, several talking birds, and the predator animals from Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, like Kaa, Shere Khan, Bagheera, and King Louie. Yeah, not sure how Willingham was able to get the okay with Disney, given he was their creation for the movie, though I guess he was different enough to go under parody. Anyway, while Snow and Renard head up to the hills fighting off their pursuers and even killing Shere Khan, we learn that some fables, like giants and dragons, were placed under a sleeping spell. Before you ask, they actually were okay with it, as they did want to protect the other fables. Back in Fabletown, Bigby and Blue catch wind of what's going on, first with the Knight's prophecy, and later not getting any word in from the farm, leading them to head down there to save them. Back with Snow, they find Wayland, who is actually being held captive and forced to build the weapons we saw earlier, since he's one of the greatest blacksmiths. Unfortunately, Goldie's forces catch up to her, but Rose is able to buy them some time by talking them into keeping her as a prisoner and to focus more on the invasion, giving Snow time to come up with a really cool plan. So remember when I mentioned the sleeping giants and dragon? Yeah, they fall like napkins. Blue, Charming, Buffkin, and Bluebeard came to the assist, but it seems to be over, until Snow gets shot in the head via a sniper from Goldie, and luckily, unlike decapitation, this is something a well-remembered fable can survive, though she does end up in a coma where she meets who seems to be the ghost of Colin.
What happened, Colin?
The short version is, I got my head chopped off and mounted while you got yours subsistently blown off by a high-power rifle.
Then where are we now?
You got me, Snow, my sweet darling. Although, judging by the lack of set decoration, I guess we're in a limbo, or some similar waiting room to the afterlife.
So, we are dead then?
Well, considering my condition, I certainly hope so. But I'm not entirely convinced you are. You have that still holding on to her last shuddering breath look about you.
Then what should I do?
I don't know. Have you tried waking up?
When she wakes, she learned the farm was defeated, with some of the rebels either being put under probation, or in the case of Dun and Posey, executed. However, Goldilocks escaped with no sign of where she went. Waylon plans to resign as leader given, well, the coup, which Snow understands, but does ask him to take a new role. Though she wasn't for the rebels, she did find the weapons he made for the four-legged animals very impressive, and believes that they could be used someday to fight against the adversary, because though they don't plan today, or even tomorrow, they do hope to face him again and reclaim their home. That's all fine and good, but who's gonna run the farm?
Why not me? Wayland is out, and I can do the job. You run the city of Fabletown, and I run the farm. So at long last, we're back to being equals again. I can handle that. Can you?
That's right, Rose volunteers to run things, and it makes sense. She actually did understand their plight, and unlike Goldie, cared for their well-being and was willing to make things better, but in a more peaceful way. Even talking Snow and the gang to allow the giants and dragons to go through a permanent transformation spell so they can become the new Three Little Pigs to keep the story alive. And the dragon, Clara, would be a crow, so she could travel with Red, as she would still have her dragon abilities and be her enforcer, since surviving rebels might try to get revenge. The second volume is pretty quick, but still a ton of fun, and I do like the subtle nod to Orwell's novel. Kudos on Willingham and the story's artist, Mark Buckingham, some of the weapon designs, and actually showing off how some of the four-legged animals would be capable of using them. And again, I like how they mix things around by changing the main focus from Bigby to Snow and Rose. This did a great job giving us a reason to sympathize with Rose, showing she's more than just a party girl turned con artist. She does love her sister, but also resents her, as while Snow could survive a shot in the head, she couldn't, because while everyone knows Snow White, very few know Rose Red. She felt left behind and forgotten, something that she felt was happening to the inhabitants of the farm. It was the start of one of the most crucial character arcs in the series, but I'll get more into that another time. Now, let's move on to Volume 3, Storybook Love. Don't let the title fool you, though. There is some romance in the story, but this ain't gonna be any slice of life. This volume has 3 stories, the first being a one-shot, also sort of a backdoor pilot for Jack of Fables. It really has nothing to do with the overall plot of the series, but like how we see that Rose was more than just a con artist, we see that Jack wasn't just a con artist, but a real asshole, as he screws with the laws of nature just to get laid. The second, Bigby and the gang deal with a Bunniie who has discovered that they have been alive for hundreds of years, though Bigby at first thinks no one will take him seriously, since despite having documents and pictures, those can easily be forged. Plus, despite getting the centuries of life right, he believes they're vampires, which is why he thinks he's safe talking to Bigby, believing that vampires have no power during the day. Plus, he then reveals that he does have proof of Bigby transforming into a wolf when he thought he was alone at night. While Bluebeard wants to kill him and be done with it, everyone else is against it, since it could also risk exposure. Instead, they come up with a plan to trick him into giving up the evidence, with the help of Briar Rose, aka Sleeping Beauty, who still has her sleeping curse. Whenever something pricks her finger, Briar, along with the people around her, are forced to fall into a deep sleep, though it will take a bit. So while the gang wait...
That's kind of cool. If we were vampires, we'll be rich.
How so?
Think it through. Vampires make more vampires just by sucking people's blood, right? Do you know how much this Monday Fox would pay to someone who could make them immortal? Hey, I just thought...
Forget it, Jack.
Forget what?
You just realized you could make use of the same old pictures of yourself and the rest of us that Sharp found to convince gullible rich Mondays that you are a vampire and cheat them out of their money.
How?
By promising to make them immortal. I'm way ahead of you, Jack. I always will be. After all these years, I know how your mind works. Try it, and I'll lock you up for a century.
Damn it, Bigby!
Shut up, Jack. Thorn growing phase has started.
They find him, and though it almost gets bloody, with Bluebeard still wanting to kill him, and Bigby stopping him, they successfully nab him. However, it does take a bit for him to wake up along with everyone else, as Prince Charming tries to wake Briar the same way he did before. Yeah, it turns out she has to be kissed by someone who loves her, and, well, they're divorced, so what do you expect? Flycatcher volunteers. He is still technically a prince, and actually is fond of her. So, he goes for it. And though this is a pretty nice scene, kinda played off for laughs, this would later become a bit of a plot hole on what happens later. Not enough to ruin the series, but something that is worth noting. It works, and the guy wakes up, with Bigby tricking him to think that he's under a vampire spell, and has no choice to obey, and even if it didn't work, also took some questionable pictures with him and Pinocchio. Yeah, Bigby owes him big time. It works, but Bigby made one mistake. He had Bluebeard collect the research. This is when Bluebeard shows his true colors. Throughout the first 2 volumes, we've seen him constantly get stopped from indulging in his dark impulses, like when he tried to kill Jack, his attempt to marry and most likely kill Rose. Even the farm was kind of a deal breaker for him when it ended with the rebels surrendering before he arrived. Sure, they got to execute some of them, but he wanted to kill someone, and he's getting tired of following the rules. So what does a pirate do? He starts a mutiny. In the third story, the titular storybook love, Bluebeard, with the help of a returned Goldilocks, sets up a plan against both Bigby and Snow. Unfortunately for them, they were found out by Wilfred, a Lilliputian from Gulliver's Travels, who was sent from the farm with his mouse companion to spy on Bluebeard for an unknown benefactor. Though he is discovered and his mouse friend killed, he is able to escape, but also ends up lost within the building's walls. Though while they do look for him, Bluebeard makes sure that he can at least get his plan in motion. He uses a potion that, though won't straight up mind control them, will at least make Bigby and Snow vulnerable to suggestion and succumb to their baser impulses, and just in case they survived, to believe it was Jack's fault, cause fuck him. He has them take a trip deep within the woods and makes them in charge while Snow's away. While there, Goldie will be waiting to take them out. With them dead, Bluebeard would take Snow's position and help Goldie with her plan to take over Fabletown. Though there were two things they didn't count on. The first being that the enchantment wore off sooner than expected, and were almost going to escape until Goldie destroyed their ride back, making it where their only way to escape would be on foot, giving Goldie another chance to kill them, most dangerous game style. And if you're wondering why they didn't have them end themselves or try to kill them in his office when he had them, it's because A, because they're well remembered, they're hard to kill, and B, it would lead to too many questions, since if they die in such a manner, or in the vicinity of Fabletown, they might grow suspicious and investigate. Yes, I'm not coming back on the trip would also raise suspicion, but they'd probably focus more on looking for them before considering foul play. The second is Prince Charming. You see, after the sleep spell was broken, he gaslit Briar to let him stay at her place for a while, and it turns out he was actually the one that hired Wilfred and his fellow Lilliputians to get dirt on the old pirate, most likely to blackmail him, but when he learned about the plan, he changed his mind. Throughout this volume, Charming has been spending time with both his ex-wives, and though he is totally fine with being a con artist who sleeps around, he started to realize that it was high time that he attempted to make amends with them, starting with Snow, leading to a clash of swords between him and Bluebeard, while Bigby and Snow are running from Goldie. It's an intense chase throughout, even leading to Bigby having to revert back to his full big bad wolf form to better protect Snow, since she's still walking with a limp after the gunshot, leading to a brief moment of rest where the two actually address Bigby admitting his attraction to Snow, and how it might not be as one-sided as we first thought. Though Bigby kind of ruins the mood a bit when he reveals that one of the reasons they grew to like her was because for some reason he couldn't block her out of his senses, since yeah, kind of like Superman and his hearing, Bigby can hear and smell everything, so train himself to be able to block certain sounds and smells out to avoid getting overwhelmed. But Snow is the only one he can't block out, which he does find creepy. He does make it clear he's not stalking her, and he's not proud of it. Hell, he even admitted that he wanted to be on his own when they first came in the Mundy world, but Snow insisted he stay as sheriff and was too embarrassed to admit his reasoning. Awkward talks aside, they still have Goldie on their tail, and you might think that since she's Goldilocks and he's the big bad wolf, he'd have the advantage along with their longevity, giving them the edge. Goldie surprises us as she anticipated fighting Bigby a long time ago, back when she first started her plans at the farm. And yes, a shot in the head may not kill them, but as we saw with Snow, the damage is still pretty severe and left her out of commission for weeks. And as we saw with Colin, dismemberment is one of the few things most fables can survive. So she could just shoot them in the head, and while they're disoriented, do what she did to the poor pig and leave them for dead, or leave them in a state where they wish they were. Plus, this is Goldilocks. Everyone knows who Goldilocks is, meaning she's just as durable, maybe even more. In a last-ditch attempt to stop her, Bigby does what he does best. He huffs, he puffs, and it decimates half the forest, but Goldie barely had a scratch on her and is even able to get the drop on Bigby in his wolf form. Charming is in a similar situation with Bluebeard, but luckily is able to gain the upper hand and land a killing blow to his heart. And like Rose Red, not many people know who Bluebeard is, so his death is actually gonna stick. Bigby and Snow aren't as lucky, and Goldie nearly takes them both out, since her vulnerability is so strong, even when Snow hits her in the head with an axe that she brought on the trip directly to the back of Goldie's head. She barely reacts. It's only by pure luck Snow is able to trip her up, leading her to fall off a cliff, hit every rock on the way down, land on the nearby road, right on the pavement, and yet she's still able to get up, but then is hit by a semi-truck, leaving a bloody splatter. And the crazy part is, she's still alive. She actually survived that and later appeared in Cinderella spin-off series. This is how strong this memory system is. The two are safe and head back home. Charming exposes Bluebeard and is rewarded with all of his possessions, along with his position, meaning that he doesn't need to move mooch off his wives or anyone else ever again. Happy ending, right? Well, no. When Snow gets home, she's checked out by Dr. Swinehart, the same doctor who treated her gunshot last volume, and from the Brothers Grimm story, the Three Army Surgeon. And she gets some unexpected news. News she shares with Bigby. She's pregnant, and she's pissed. Not because Bigby slept with her while they're under the spell, as horrible as that is, neither one was in control and had no memory after the spell wore off, but because of Bigby's senses that you mentioned earlier, he knew and lied about them sleeping together, since that was a concern that she had, but said it was unlikely. He argues that if she knew, it would distract her, and was just trying to keep her focused. Protection or not, he lied, and now Snow is in a position she has no idea how to deal with. Which you'd think would end the volume there, but there was also a one-shot story that dives into the history of the Lilliputians and some of their adventures, which is pretty good. But like the Jack story, doesn't really affect the overall plot. Storybook love, for a name like that, is a pretty intense and dark story, but also sets up more themes and lore of the greater world beyond Fabletown, and the many who inhabit it. Bluebeard's betrayal was nicely handled. Goldilocks was an unexpected force of nature. Charming became more of a wild card than a one-note joke, which was a welcome twist. And the story between Snow and Bigby is handled well. As you can tell, they do care for each other, but due to Snow becoming jaded throughout the years given her past relationships and Bigby's more cold and distant nature, he does consider himself a wolf first and a man second, and tends to forget the consequences of his choices on the emotional level, makes it truly hard to trust one another. Will they be able to make things work? Will Rose be able to keep the farm in check and continue the improvements? And what exactly happened that day the Fables left the homeland? Well, tune in next time as we dive into the rest of Chapter 1, as these first 3 volumes were fun, but they were only the prologue. What comes next is where the story really begins. Where wooden soldiers march, we have the birth of a ghost, we visit the homeland, go through Arabian nights and days, and come face to face with the adversary, and deal with both war and pieces. Later.